disruptive force not only in Taiwan but also elsewhere in the world. Originally, each presenter will be given for a minute, but I think we can better relax the time limit. So each presenter will have 3 minutes, and discussion will have 8 minutes for each paper. So without further ado, let's welcome our first presenter, Professor Paul Kenny from Australian National University.
Some of the research I've been doing on populism over the last few years. So what I want to do is to try to put populism in perspective, to put it in global perspective, if you like. Very often when we think of populism, we think of one person in particular these days. And I think that's a mistake. Populism has a much lengthier history. So Professor Muller was pointing out, we shouldn't just think of this as a contemporary phenomenon that just sort of emerged out of nowhere in 2016. The populism I'm going to talk about today a little bit is Indira Gandhi. And very often we don't tend to think of her in this sort of global-wide populism. But her case was and I want to show that I can shed a great deal of light on not only populism in Asia, but populism much more broadly as well. And I'll talk about those other broader global contexts a little bit later today if people stick around for that. So what I argued in the book I wrote, which was originally my PhD dissertation, so I started up I guess back in 2010 or so, before populism was really on most people's minds. So I've been thinking about this for quite a while. What I found really is that between 1980 and 2010, when I finished the data analysis for my book, basically all instances of populist success occurred in what we might call patronage democracies, like India. So again, as Professor Muller pointed out, we fret and we worry about the rise of populism in the West. But there have been very few instances in which populists have actually got into executive office by themselves. They've managed to become part of coalitions, but there are no real examples other than most recently Trump, who's been able to come to power in their own right, and even he does so as part of the Republican Party. So when we think about populism, we have to think about patronage democracies. So what are patronage democracies? So these are ones in which political mobilization occurs through clientelistic ties primarily. That means a very clear quid pro quo between parties, elites, and voters. So selective goods are provided and distributed downward, and votes are distributed up through brokers back to parties. So these kinds of patronage-based democracies or clientelistic democracies have been the predominant form of democracy in Asia. They've been the predominant form of democracy in Southern Europe and in Latin America. And you might be thinking to yourself, they are actually all the places where populists have also been successful. So why is that the case? So clientelistic democracies or patronage democracies have a very specific kind of weakness, and populists are able to exploit that. So in India, as you might know, from 1947, the Indian Congress Party governs in its own right. So the Congress Party was the party of the nationalist independence movement. It brought together a very diverse coalition, really exemplified by these two men, Jawaharlal Nehru on your left and Sardar Patel on your right. So Nehru was the kind of center leftist, and Patel was the center rightist. And these were really the two politicians that came to the fore after Gandhi's assassination. Patel, in fact, was actually Gandhi's favorite. And the sort of very early Congress Party after independence was sort of cleaved along these lines, along sort of center-left and center-right, as well as the more extreme left and the extreme right had essentially been purged after one of them had assassinated Gandhi. So the party was sort of hewing to the left, but Patel was this anchor on the right-hand side. But what happens very shortly after independence is Patel died of natural causes. But this gives Nehru basically unfettered control over the party. And so we think of Nehru as a Democrat in a real sense, but internally within the party, Nehru was a dictator, if you like. Okay? And so it's Nehru's ability to be able to control the party with an iron fist that keeps Indian democracy together for the next 20 years or so. So what Nehru was able to do is to distribute party tickets. So basically, if you wanted to get elected into a national office, you had to have a Congress Party ticket. And Nehru controlled that from New Delhi. And that was crucial. So in states like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, which were huge states, the size of European countries, or most of their Asian countries in terms of their electorate or their population, they were themselves cleaved by factions, mostly personalistic, kind of dominant political actors who had their own sets of followers. And Nehru could essentially pick winners and losers. So it guaranteed a certain loyalty. What Nehru wanted, a certain amount of policy coherence and a certain amount of political coherence and political stability. But with Nehru's death in 1964, the party system descends into crisis. What happens is that power reverts back to the old state brokers. The big dominant governors were actually called chief ministers of Indian states. So this in a way is like giving the keys to the asylum back over to the inmates, right? So power completely gets decentralized. They reverse all sort of central control. So now there's no stick anyone at the center or the top of Indian politics can use to discipline these brokers. And the Congress Party then loses control over most of India's states in the 1967 state elections. And they lose not because there was a rise of some sort of social movement, a kind of reformist or leftist sort of social movement or rightist social movement. They lose because the people who had once run for the Congress Party simply made their own party and won with those parties. So Charan Singh in Uttar Pradesh is a sort of prime example. He had run basically under the Congress banner for the first 20 years after independence, but then just made his own new party and governed the state in 1967 with this new party, keeping those old clientelistic networks himself. But this then leaves Indira Gandhi, who becomes Prime Minister in 1967, with a huge problem. So she now needs to somehow distribute goods to voters to get votes in return for her Congress Party at the national level. But she's got no loyal brokers in between to do this. All of the chief ministers are now from other parties where they're extracting too high a price to deliver votes to her. And so what this means, how do you deal with the situation? You've got to appeal to the voters, but there are now disloyal brokers in between. So she devises the populist solution. In the first instance, she goes with coercion. So what this graph shows here is the instrument of president's rule. So president's rule allows the prime minister, through the sort of nominal president, to remove chief ministers of states on grounds that politics is unstable in that state. So when they have sort of weak majorities, she can manipulate them and so on. And that allows her to rule directly from New Delhi. So you can see the number of instances of president's rule just shoots up under Indira Gandhi. She's got all of these disloyal brokers in between, so she just gets rid of them and puts in her own. So there's one problem with this, though president's rule only allowed her to discipline these governors and replace her own for 12 months at a time. After that, you'll have to have fresh elections. So it was a temporary solution. So instead, what does she do? She says we started losing in state by state. This was after 1967 to 1969. And she says she saw no way in which she could bridge the gap except by going once more direct to the people. Direct to the people. This is the populist sort of marker. Cut out those in between. Yeah? So this was Indira's way of connecting back to the people, of mobilizing votes, but now having to do so without brokers. So she devised what I would call a charismatic form of mobilization, direct with the people and with minimal use of a party. So she was a media pioneer, so we sometimes associate this with Modi, with his use of holograms, or with Duterte, with his use of Facebook or Twitter, whatever it might be. But she actually was doing this way back when with radio. So between 1967 and 1971, she doubles the number of radios. And so radios were kind of village-level sort of infrastructure. So these weren't just sort of a single family. People would gather around to listen to a radio, and it would be a sort of direct form of propaganda into villages. And so she was very, very aware of the power of communication. Her only job before becoming Prime Minister in politics had been to be Minister of Communications. And so radios were actually given out for free during her tenure in office, and for good reason. So I again ran some empirical analyses, and I find that those who listen to radio, controlling for a variety of other factors, including education, were a third more likely to vote for Indira Gandhi's Congress. Okay, so she was really just using state infrastructure to boost the vote. And then she wins in 1971 in a landslide. So she won over the old ominous-sounding syndicate of powerful chief ministers. So what are the lessons we can draw out from that? So patronage-based party organization can be stable when it's accompanied by coercion. So there's a bit of a paradox here. So we know in cases like the LDP in Japan, we have a patronage-based kind of democracy, but it's really quite coercive in a sense, right? So traditionally, the party oligarchy or party sort of elite have managed to sort of control factions within the party. So factions are really what determine the allocation of power in Japan. It's really only possible to have a lengthy period of government to fight within the LDP rather than to set up a different party. The problem, however, is that patronage or clientelism is prone to inflation where it's more competitive. So if we allow brokers too much control, like these chief ministers, they can extract a very high price for their loyalty. And eventually, this becomes sort of inflationary over time. And in some ways, actually, and we can talk about this in Q&A if possible, there's a parallel with what happens in Russia prior to Putin, or at least in the early years of Putin. Governors start to become too powerful, and Putin flips their wings and replaces them with non-elected heads of local government. And the other thing about patronage-based government is that factionalism makes it susceptible to this low-cost populist outline. So populists really only need some way of communicating directly with the people. For Indira Gandhi, it was radio, which she used government funds to distribute for free and then exploit. For Donald Trump, it's the marginal cost of a tweet, almost nothing. And here we have again the decline of parties as a condition of populist success. We tend to think of parties only in the Western type of sort of strong bureaucratic party, and I'll talk about those later. But here we have a decline of a different type of party, the patronage party. And so what we see here, again, sort of bringing to bear a lot more statistical data, but looking at all cases of populist vote share over about a 30-year period, what you find is that populists are successful in clientelistic or patronage-based democracies when they become more decentralized, when brokers get more power. Okay, so these two things interact. You can have a patronage-based party system that's stable if it's quite centralized. But when they become decentralized, they become very weak, and populist vote share goes up. There's no relationship between centralization and decentralization for bureaucratic or programmatic parties. And again, why is it so popular? Why is populism so popular, so common in much of Southeast Asia, for instance, whenever it has been democratic? Well, look at this data. Look how low identification with political parties is. It's almost non-existent in the Philippines, single digits. Parties just don't exist, basically. In Indonesia, party loyalty very quickly after reformasi goes down. It's essentially personalistic politics. Particular local politicians will essentially sell their loyalties to whichever party will give them a better deal. Parties, again, just don't exist. So it allows populists to come to power, in the Indonesian case, within parties, and to to appeal directly to the people, or in the Philippines case, really just as charismatic individuals with a powerful local base to then use that, like Estrada did, and like Duterte to appeal directly to the people. So, why aid? Why is white populism so common in Asia? And I think these lessons extend especially to Latin America, where you have similar types of party systems. So, with persistently weak parties, when you do have parties, they're based on patronage and are very prone to factionalism and fragmentation. Going a little bit deeper, why do they look like that? Why do they have those party systems? We can talk about that, but a lot of it has to do with the type of political economy that they have, and very much based on resource exploitation and very low levels of associated labor movement development and bureaucratic political party development. So I think I just about hit the time, and I can leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have the second presenter, and afterward discussion. So we'll break the discussion here. And our second speaker will be Professor Rona Hong. He is affiliated with the La Salle University of the Philippines.
Good afternoon. I see that the picture I have on the first slide is the same picture of our president on the poster. And the topic that has been given to me, the title of the paper assigned to me, is actually Killing Democracy. It's from penal populism to data autocracy in the Philippines with a question mark. In the keynote, one point raised by Professor Muller, what happened to populists when they're in power? In the case of the Philippines, can we expect this populist president to lead us into something that is basically a complete democratic breakdown? And this is essentially what the paper tries to address. Let me go and just present images. The second image was taken by a photojournalist about less than a month after President Duterte came into power. It's a very powerful picture. Eventually, the newspaper that published this photo was sold to a close friend of President Duterte. The owners previously were forced to sell their stake in the newspaper. But one of the key things that the President Duterte has done is really to wage a all-out war against drugs. In his campaign promise, he said that he will rid the country of illegal drugs in 6 months. 3 months after, he said he cannot do it in 6 months. He asked for a 6-month extension. He's now in power for 40 months. And he says that he'll try to finish it within his term. But it just simply shows the difficulty in terms of addressing a problem that President Duterte felt was easy to address because he had his own experience in it when he was mayor of a city in Mindanao, Davao City, for more than 2 decades. Most recently, the president appointed a vice president to chair the Anti-Drug Council. He subsequently fired the vice president, saying that the vice president cannot be trusted with state secrets, and he has not assigned another person. The vice president, of course, of the country is someone who has been a leader of the opposition. Aside from the vice president, there were other women that have been more or less targeted. The one on the left there, or right, I mean, left in my case, is a senator, Senator Laila de Lima. She's been incarcerated for 1,000 days, more than 1,000 days, on what the Human Rights Watch believes to be front-up charges. She has been charged of coddling drug lords when she was Department of Justice Secretary. The next one there, here, is the former Supreme Court Chief Justice. She has been removed from office, also by President Duterte, because she has also been critical of the President's anti-drug war, especially when the President linked a number of judges as protectors of illegal drugs. And the last one there is the publisher of a website, Rappler, who has faced several charges. So the President has really gone in terms of basically violating basic civil liberties. which I think is an indication really that we have seen significant democratic erosion over the past 39 months. As a forecast done by the Varieties of Democracy Project puts the Philippines at the greatest risk of sliding into autocracy. These are the top 10 countries, and the forecast is that within the next 2 years, the Philippines will most probably become autocratic. And the probability, if I'm not mistaken, is indicated there is about close to 45%. I do agree with this particular forecast, but I'm cautiously optimistic. But my agreement is largely based on a number of things. One is that we've seen that our democratic system is fundamentally flawed. This is a picture of the first Philippine Assembly. This is in 1907. As Paul pointed out, it's true in the Philippines, we basically had a very exclusive representative institutions. It's a contest among the elites. And to that extent, even the anti-elite tenor of the president actually masks the reality that he himself belongs to a political elite. He's a faction, he belongs to a faction elite. The other thing that we see historically also in the Philippines that brings about the rise of populism is that we have weak political parties. Dr. Kenny pointed out that in the Philippines, when we ask Filipinos whether they favor political party, less than 10% would favor political party. When President Duterte became president, he had 3 party mates in Congress. When he became president, the 3 suddenly snowballed into 96 members belonging to his party. So there's a lot of shifting allegiances, which is what is referred to by a social scientist as a presidential bandwagon. The other thing that we should note also in the Philippines, and this has been pointed out by a number of scholars, is that we have a very strong president. This is a quotation from the President of the Commonwealth. This is Manuel L. Quezon. Basically, he says here that the president can never be a dictator because the significant powers are given to the president by the Constitution. As a number of scholars have noted, this is a prescription largely for what is referred to as a process of autocratization. It has been found out that in what is referred to as the third wave of autocratization, that the primary reason for autocratization is not so much a military intervention or a foreign intervention, it's largely executive degradation. It is you have powerful executives who basically try to concentrate and consolidate more power unto themselves. In the Philippines, we can say there have been episodes of democratic erosion, not only under Duterte, but also under prior presidents. All former presidents from Fidel Ramos up to Duterte have tried to change the rules of the game or change the Constitution to their favor. And we're saying this, and although the president has said that he might not change the Constitution, he still has about 2.5 years in his position. He'll probably just change his mind and engage in some form of mobilization. Why am I cautiously optimistic about the country not leading towards blatant autocracy? There's only one reason, and this is on the right side of this particular slide. The right side represents our 22 of 24 senators. The 2 senators that are not there, one is in jail. The other one, I think many of you are familiar with, is a popular boxer who became a legislator in the country. You will see him there, his name was Manny Pacquiao, or Pacman. He intends to run as president of the Republic, and that's the other not so interesting, not so pleasant news. The one on the left would be the Speaker of the lower house. I say I'm cautiously optimistic because in the past 3.5 years and in the past less than 100 years, the main block to executive degradation has always come from the Senate. Because the Senate has certain individuals who will eventually aspire for higher positions, more specifically for the presidential and vice presidential position that is due for election in 2022. Already we have seen a number of senators opposing certain statements of the president and the president mocking them. I think that's something similar. I was listening to Dr. Shao's statement a while ago of our time on this. In the Philippines, our populists also are quite vulgar with regard to their statements. And there can never be anyone more vulgar than Duterte himself. I think this is being taped. I hope I can return to my country. But essentially, this is one thing that is like a slight autocracy. You have a Senate that is opposed to charter change, and they will continually be opposed to charter change because changing the rules of the game right now would take away the aspirations of a number of its members. It's as simple as that. It's really pragmatic politics that will lead towards the block or hindrance to charter change. However, another institution which used to be our protector, the protector of civil liberties, is an institution that we may or may not necessarily rely on in hindering our slide to autocracy. I refer here to the Supreme Court. There are faces on the right side there. They're basically our 15 justices. By the end of the year, 11 of the 15 justices of our Supreme Court would have been appointed by President Duterte. By the end of President Duterte's term, 13 of the 15 Supreme Court justices would be appointees of the President. In that sense, they may decide in favor of the President. Unlike all other presidents in the country, President Duterte in the last more than 3 years has had consistently favorable decisions for his administration in cases brought up to the Supreme Court. We have not seen this in previous administrations. Even under Marcos, the Supreme Court tended to rule against Marcos on certain cases. Under Duterte, the record is 100% in favor of the administration or any of his allies. Now, the Supreme Court is supposed to be the protector of fundamental liberties in the country. There was one question raised to the Supreme Court, which is the legality of the arrest of a senator, Laila de Lima. The majority, most of them appointed to the President, sided with the President. We don't exactly know how the Supreme Court will vote later on. The only optimistic part here is that a study done by 2 scholars in 2014 pointed out that if the President's popularity declines in the Philippines, decisions of the Supreme Court tend to go against the President. However, as I said, this is a big if because up to this point, President Duterte's satisfaction rating is significantly high. This is from another polling organization, the Social Weather Stations. The net satisfaction rating is plus 65. I don't think that there's any chief executive in the world right now, or in the past 3 years, who has enjoyed majority approval or majority satisfaction rating. And this is just the net. In our own surveys in Pulse Asia, the trust rating of the President declined recently from 85 in June. It's now 74%, but that still means that 3 out of 4 Filipinos continue to trust President Duterte. There has been a decline in terms of the national administration's rating in addressing several issues. But the more telling here is that continually, 9 out of 10 Filipinos support the war on drugs. Despite the fact that you have a number of them who believe that there are extrajudicial killings, 66%, and that still 65% are worried that they might themselves become, or members of their family become, victims of extrajudicial killings. There's one final protection, and skip this slide. There's one final protection against a slight autocracy. This is if people participate in politics. Then again, in our survey that was done sometime in 2017, we found out that 85% of Filipinos did not engage in any political activity within the past year. We still find right now that about 60% of Filipinos disagree that martial law is necessary to solve the country's problem. But that only means that about 1 out of 3 Filipinos may actually be a constituency for autocracy. And that segment alone is sufficient if someone who wishes to maintain himself in power would mobilize that particular segment of the population. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much. Session.
So I'm happy to discuss it for the first 2 papers. Myself not being an expert on this field, so I learned a lot from these 2 papers. Let me go with my comments on the first one to Professor Kenny. I think the paper is very theoretical. It started at empirical rate. And don't be fooled by the subtitle. Actually, it's more than just India. And I think the cases of the Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, even Japan are discussed here. As I see, the theoretical approach is solidly based in classical sociological tradition, primarily a various tradition, which means an organizational approach to the understanding of the problem of political authority. And I also like the definition, the very interesting definition of populism, which means a charismatic mobilization of the people. And as Professor Paul Kenny explained it, that it happens usually in patronage democracy because the local voters are not always reliable. They are always there's always a tendency for them to engage self-serving behavior, so that populists emerge as a kind of a frequent, necessary reaction to the decay of patronage democracy. So based on that, my first question was that do you see a similar trajectory also in like more in a democracy where programmatic parties dominate? Like, for example, there might be also a decay among programmatic parties, like what we see in the West after 2016, the rise of Donald Trump, Brexit, and also other right-wing populists in continental Europe. And we say that we have this kind of populist politicians because of the traditional center-led and center-right parties were in big trouble. Therefore, we see the movement of populism as a natural, I guess, a political machine that is no longer working. Also related is the puzzle I really, when I first received the paper, because I thought the paper would be more about Narendra Modi, the current Prime Minister of India, rather than Indira Gandhi. So in so doing, it actually enlarged the definition of populism than we usually use. So I'm not sure whether that's the way to go, but could you elaborate more about the rationale why you try to use this larger extended definition of populism? The last question maybe also maybe related to Professor Holmes' perspective. I will comment in a moment is that because I only know very little about populism. Based on what I know, I think most of the theory that I've ever read is primarily geared toward explanation of what happened in the West. That we have, like as I said, the two main approach. One is economical, the other is cultural. That the populist politicians rise because there was economic grievances among working class who become the losers of a more globalized economy. So the rise of the populism can be seen as a reaction to neoliberal reforms. So you see working class being losing out. And the second explanation would be more cultural, like to understand the rise of populism as a cultural backlash against a more cosmopolitan outlook or against multiculturalism. So the anger is always geared towards immigrants, weekend, the so-called angry white man explanation. Because your explanation is entirely political, as I see it. So my question is, how does your explanation fit into this cultural or economic dimension? That's for Professor Kenny. So for Professor Holmes, I also like your very thoughtful and in-depth characterization of what happened in the current Philippines. So most of people outside of the Philippines know about the actual judicial killing, which I think it has more than 5,000 right now, which is very bad. And I think in the paper, Professor Holmes talked more about the harm that President Duterte do about political institutions. Like he imprisoned the opposition politician, he shut down the critical media, and also threatened the judicial independence. So all these institutions, I read a book like the book How Democracy Died by Levitsky and Zebra. All these institutions are called by this order the guardrail of democracy. So they are very important to check the presidential power, media, judges, and opposition. So my question is that what happened when what happened in the Philippines when President Duterte were attacking these essential democratic guardrails, but people are not angry about that. I think one of the possible answers is that this institution might already lost their popular support prior to Duterte's surge. Maybe people in India think that the media is not so trustworthy, that the current self-elected people, that all politicians are still serving. So that's why we have this kind of the moment, the circumstance that invite people like to take control of the party. So I want to know what happened prior to that. Are these democratic institutions already being suspected by popular people? And the second question is also a puzzle I want to ask you is that you mentioned that 74% of the people supported President Duterte, but around more than 60 people also worried that they might become victims of extrajudicial killing. So how do you really explain that? And also in one footnote, you explained that despite of what happened in the Philippines right now, there remains a very solid for democracy popular opinion that 59% of the people always prefer democracy, whereas only 20% of the people sometimes prefer authoritarianism. Yet the civil society, as you mentioned in the paper, is declining and is not capable of mobilizing any resistance against the So I really wonder why. So that need to explain this. Because I raised this question because actually 2 weeks ago, Taiwan Foundation of Democracy held a workshop, and I met two civil society activists from the Philippines, and they were very eloquent and to share the experience of mobilizing campaigns under these ordinary circumstances. And also, based on what I know, I think civil society in the Philippines is very active, particularly due to the fact that most Filipinos are much more English fluent than people in Taiwan, so I think they have well international vintage. So the question is really about why the media can maintain this rather problematic rule. So that's my question. So I end my discussion here, and so we'll move to the third paper. The third paper is presented by Song Hong Lee, who is a sociologist here in Academia Sinica.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present the book chapter. It will be published in a few months. Chinese book chapter here, and co-author with Wen Zhenlin here. He is a PhD candidate of Political Science Department in Chengdu University. And last year is also around November 24. At that night, I'm quite shocked. After the election, after the local election in Taiwan, the DPP government lose most of the mayor positions in Taiwan. In fact, a few days ago, I met some scholars from Singapore and the other countries say, yes, I think that DPP will lose, but not like that night show that it's formed to the landslide. So it starts from my own imagination and prediction of the political situation in Taiwan. So my own question is that what's wrong with myself? Why I have such a wrong prediction of the Taiwan politics? Because I think that the Taiwan party identity or ethnic voting behavior is quite stable before the recent years. So this is my own question that so I have to deal with a problem that in fact I have never write anything about populism before this period. So this is the situation that we face here. That we have two political stars from this several years, and one is the Mayor Taipei Mayor who is still, I think, quite popular in Taiwan politics. And also another one who now run for presidency campaign, Mayor Kaohsiung City Mayor Han Kuo-yu, come from KMT camp. So in fact, we try to. The first question is that why we call them populists, right? This is a big problem that in the very beginning we try to define who is the populist, and also refer to Professor Miller's definition and the other definition. That first of all, of course, they are anti-establishment, and also they use basically very similar language to run for their campaign in elections. Say they call for common people's interests, and also try to use some sort of moral moral languages to condemn the establishment or the incumbents. So we try to figure out who is the supporters of them. This empirically, this is what we are doing. So in fact, there are some. After we analyze the data, we find that there was different. So you can so-called co-bands and handweights. In fact, their class correlation is very different. So we're trying to link our findings to the other populist literature. So this is the rise of the populist politicians in Taiwan in 2018, and we find, and also, fortunately, we do have a survey before and after, in the middle of the election and before the election. So we do have a survey in June 2018 and November 2018. And in the two-way survey, we find that also correspondingly we also get an internet pool from the internet, and we find that there are at the same time that the internet voice of Han and Ke basically the same with our survey. So, and also we know that in fact some the Wang Liqiang who surrendered in Australia said that he's the Chinese spy that tried to mobilize people, use the internet as sort of disinformation or internet attack to Taiwan. That also happened during this period, around June and November in 2018. And also we have the individual level survey during the period before that and after that. So in the 6 months, who is the supporters come from that kind of internet attacks, and also some mobilization of the populist petitions. This is the question, the empirical research question that we made here. So as you see that there was 17% difference before the internet, and also movement like mobilization of the populist petitions. So our question is, empirically our question is who is the 70% that changed the preference in June and November. So so we link it to the sort of the other kinds of ideas of the global origin. Although I know that before the lecture, during the lunchtime, I have known that Professor Muller doesn't like the idea that we link such kinds of ideas to the globalization or sort of label them as some social classes to the populist supporters, but we still try to figure out who is the 17% that changed their mind in a very short period. So we try to find out, someone try to define the word populism in such a some people that try to figure out and try to define who is the populist in the world. And also this kind of populism index in fact try to argue that after the financial crisis, either in the 1929 or recent 2007 global financial crisis, there was an observation that such kinds of indicators, globally populist rise, arrest around 1 decade after that. So this is an interesting. There was a lot of arguments say that in fact this shows that there were some losers of the global economic crisis, so that people will blame blame on the politicians, incumbent politicians, say that a sort of anti-establishment movement that will be the opportunity for the populist politicians. And so there was also interesting that in Taiwan that we have faced very similar, although there was only a few literatures talk about that, but in fact we faced the same problem that in the last 2 decades we get so-called China impact, that our whole economic structure being basically integrated into the so-called cross-strait economy, so that in fact we face a very high young people unemployment, and also the industrialization, very similar to the situation of so-called Rust Belt, blue-collar workers that lose their jobs, and also think that they may prefer so-called protectionism in the Western world. So this is the basic idea that we have in a study, and also try to figure out the social origins and who is the supporters of the populism. So we try to find some linkage between class position and who is the winners and who is the losers in the last 20 years in Taiwan. We face the problem of the industrialization, that we face the problem of the economic integration with China, and also some economic crisis that basically also lead to a lot of small and middle enterprises that went bankrupt in this decade. And domestically, we face an industrial transformation that indeed change our industrial structure. That basically small and medium enterprises, small owners face a very strong economic pressure. Reflects also on the tendency of bankruptcy, also the income distribution, and small dealers, even in the night markets, small owners, they face a competition from internet business or come from the big shopping mall. So we face that kind of industrial changes here. And also, of course, we believe now, I personally believe that China indeed evolved into that kind of internet manipulation in Taiwan. I think that most of the people will believe that, although we don't know who if one thing can replace the real one. But I think that most of people here think that real is such the internet information exists. So we also introduce that kind of ideas here and try to learn something from the traditional political sociology. That is, who is the supporters of the, for example, authoritarian leaders and lead to a democratic breakdown. So this is basic. But recently, in the last 2 decades, around 1 decade or 2 decades, some literature mentioned about the precariat that may be the supporters of the West, the populist parties and leaders in the Western world. We also consider that. So we try to give you some idea about the transformation of the Taiwan's employment. Show that in fact we have to face a lot of because Taiwan has been labeled as a false island, which means that there was a lot of small and middle enterprises in Taiwan that is very prosperous and very successful. But in fact, during the last 30 years, we see the self-employed decline sharply, and the unemployment rate is faced during the last 2 decades, and mostly comes from the relationship between the trade with China. And we also see that during the surveys, during the 2 periods of surveys, 2 waves of surveys, indeed the self-employed and unskilled workers, in fact, the income declined during the last 2 waves of surveys. So we try to figure out if they really change their mind during the 2 waves of surveys. And indeed, the result is that self-employed and also unemployment form what we find that the 70% difference during the 2 waves of surveys. They are the majority, they are significantly related to the increasing part of the Hungary supporters. So, and we also try to figure out who supports code. And the result is that in fact code supporters is very similar. Their socio-economic background is basically very similar to traditional program so-called DPP supporters. So this is a very strange finding, but we think that it still makes some sense that in fact the code supporter is more closer to the like the one faction of the penguin, the whole penguin camp, but not really the the supporters of the so-called populism. We find that the pink blue supporters come from the unemployment, unskilled laborers, and self-employed workers in our survey. We think that it is basically the same to some of the ideas or findings from the imperial studies in the Western society. And this is the story right now, but in fact we are now dealing with the data of 2019, which we will give you maybe another story that the rise and fall of populism in Taiwan. See if we can defeat that kind of challenge. Okay? So this is our thank you.
Good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Paul Spin, and I prepared this, like Donghong, I'm a newcomer in the field of, in the research on the populism, and this paper I prepared with my research assistant, Joe Yin, with a PhD candidate at the National Taiwan University. And our motivation in this research, or what my own motivation in this research is about climate skepticism or blatant denial of global warming, because I've been conducting research on industrial pollution and environmental issues like民粹. And yeah, perhaps my first encounter with populism was Donald Trump and also Brexit. I was also shocked by Duterte criminal populism, as Paul Kenny defined it. But yeah, my main focus has been what is the possible connection between climate skepticism and populism. So during his keynote speech, Professor Muller mentioned that it might be just a contingent problem, but well, I think still it's an issue. And if we compare the attitude of Western populists to Asian populists, I think it's not obvious. Well, at least climate change is not an issue for Asian populists like Duterte or Thaksin or Modi. It doesn't mean that they care more about it, but at least they don't make it an issue during their to get in power. Now in Taiwan, now there is a blank. I think there is a big blank in the literature on populism about climate change, where exception is awkward. Now in Taiwan, Han Guoyu, because with another research assistant, we made a research on air pollution in Taiwan, and we recently interviewed Kaohsiung Hanbao Juchang, the environmental agency, the director of environmental agency in Kaohsiung, who has been chosen by Han Guoyu for his competency in the research on air pollution, and also because he is in Kaohsiung. And according to this researcher, who recently resigned, actually I hope you will tell me a lot of bad things about Han Guoyu, but he didn't. So I had to admit that at least regarding the problem of air pollution, Han Guoyu did not, perhaps there is not a big change compared to the situation before, but at least I think he didn't make worse than his predecessors in Kaohsiung City. Well, that's my motivation for this research, and actually for Han Guoyu, when you look at the map of the distribution of air pollution in Taiwan, Kaohsiung is always in the red, almost always, almost every day in the red. So it's hard to deny there is a problem. So you could not ignore it, but still. And another interesting correspondence between environmental issue and local election, last year local election, is that there was a multi-question referendum. And usually in Taiwan, as民粹has showed in his book, local referenda were focusing on environmental issue, but only at local issue. And when they go to national referendum, mostly on the nuclear power plant 4, it always fails. But last year we had this 10-question multi-referendum on energy, food safety, national identity, LGBT rights. It was a pack of very indigenous pack of all kind of questions. And referendum is an issue for populism. As Professor Muller defined it, it's a way for populists to have a direct access to the real people, as he mentioned in his keynote also today. Nathan Bato, a colleague at the Institute of Political Science, who will comment on our papers, in his Nathan has a very interesting blog on politics in Taiwan, and he mentioned, I think this is fantastic with some of my own feeling, that referenda are a terrible way to make public choices, because fully informed voters can easily be manipulated by political groups and lobbies. But my question, our question with Joey was that why some populists outperform other politicians? So Zonghong just mentioned to compare Han Kuo-yu and Ko-Wen-che. But first, we also need to compare Han Kuo-yu versus other traditional politicians, and in Han Kuo-yu's case, versus other KMT politicians like Liu Xiuyan or Ho Yo-yi. And why some populists outperform other populists, like why Han Kuo-yu did finally become the candidate for KMT compared to Terry Gou, who had much more money and more contacts in China and the US, and made good arguments out of this. Why compared to Ko-Wen? But maybe the comparison with Terry Gou is more interesting. In the literature about populism, it's often mentioned about charisma and style, and those are two keywords in the literature. And for example, Paul Kenny and another scholar named Marco Garrido followed on Max Weber's definition of charisma as a relation. What is important is not, no politician has intrinsically charisma. It becomes a charisma if it is confirmed by the population, so the followers of the leader. So what is important is the relation. And we follow also on the heuristic distinction that Professor Müller makes between what populists say to get in power and what they say to stay in power. But in this paper, we focus on what they say to get in power. Big data are an interesting tool to look at populism. Some studies have shown that the influence of Russia in the US elections. In Taiwan, the China factor is a key factor during presidential and legislative elections, but not during local elections. I think Professor Bato also mentioned somewhere, and I agree with this. But in the case of the 2018 election, there have been evidence, and mostly from big data analysis, that China's influence through internet or local radios. Well, big data focus on internet, but we have also evidence that, for example, some Chinese people who bought local radio broadcasts, this kind of thing. So the increase, the performance of Han Kuo-yu during last election was very astonishing. This guy comes from nowhere. He was nobody almost nearly before July or even August. And then within 3 months he became a national star. So here it's interesting to look at what he said, not necessarily that it was very meaningful, but what is it? We think interesting to look at what he says and to see between his different slogans or calls for being elected, what was most efficient for him? What was his best contribution to himself, to his being elected, compared to his rivals? So we look at different topics. The main topics are pollution, as I mentioned, and in the economic sphere we look at, for example, the pension reform, which was a big issue during last year's election, and we look at different slogans used by Han Kuo-yu to make appeal to his followers. And we have also, big data don't use the notion of control variable, but we thought it would be interesting for comparison with other politicians, especially KMT politicians like Liu Xiuyan for air pollution or Ho Yo-yi, to look at kind of side topics as control variable. So I will tell more about this. Our raw data we purchased from a company called Large Data, and they have a well-crafted platform which is called InfoMiner, and we look at the period from starting in June up to the end of last year. So we collected 230,000 articles, which generate 8.8 billion comments, and all about Hangul, related to Hangul, some of them. The sources are 40% comes from Facebook, 30% classical news or website news, and 16% come from PTT, which is a social media very particular to Taiwan. And we use also the Jessie, an application made from the Media Lab in Sciences Po, to map the network of opinion leaders. So we look at the volume. What is called the volume is the noise created by all the articles published and the comments. We look at the evolution of the sources depending on the time. What is called channels is different categorization within one's specific social media, like here in the PTT. We compare Hangul and Covenger also, but I won't go back into this since someone has already mentioned enough. I think our contribution might be in this looking at what we call hot topics or trendy topics. And actually, when we only use Hangul as a keyword, we were a little bit disappointed by the results, because we know none of the main or side topics we assume would come up actually come up. So, and we also try with Covenger, okay, and we had the same problem. So we say, let's go the other way around. Let's start from the topics we are interested in, and let's see how they connect with Hangul. And for example, this the making force, the Fadatai, this slogan of was immediately associated with Hangul and Kaohsiung. Okay. Also, Hangul made an argument of bringing Chinese tourists in Kaohsiung, and here again, this was clearly associated with Kaohsiung and Hangul. The Hachimotilun, the love fairy school, was a word idea that Hangul brings in, like, which is very, well, populists always like this kind of word issue, and this was also clearly associated with Hangul and Kaohsiung. And what we are most interested in was air pollution. When we look at air pollution for all Taiwan, Hangul does not come first. It comes only in second position after Yu Shuyan for Taichung. But it comes second. And if we focus on air pollution in Kaohsiung, Hangul has a clear advantage compared to Chenjima, its rival from the DPP. So if we look at the Transitional Justice Commission, which was an issue during the election because of the scandal, it was clearly associated with KMT candidate Foyori, but yeah, well, let me pass on it because I don't have much time. So conclusion. Looking at the network of topics on PTT, so the social network, social media in particular to Taiwan, we find a clear association between Hangul and DPP. But, well, that's not very... We don't know yet, we haven't yet done the analysis of in which sense the directions of the criticism. We guess that Hangul's supporters make a lot of criticism of DPP, and that maybe the most 90% of the source, but we need to check this. But there is a clear association between Hangul and making fortune compared to other issues, like for example the LGBT, which was an issue. The LGBT was clearly an issue in more when we look at the geographic distribution of the articles. They are more concentrated in northern Taiwan, but in Kaohsiung and Hainan, there was not really an issue. And we find also the clear association between Hangul and air pollution. Okay. If we look at Facebook, it's slightly different, but still we find here also the air pollution associated with Hangul. And for us, it's very important result because it has tended to be disregarded by traditional political scientists. I think the issue of air pollution was not so much looked at as an important political issue. If we go back to PTT, now looking at what kind of opinion leaders, those are the people whose articles are most looked at. For example, Mark 2, this PTT ID Mark 2165 was identified by a journalist as producing 60% of the articles generated on PTT came from this Mark 2165. But the journalist, his analysis was only between the category of 8 politics, which I think is interesting, but we don't know what kind of content, what pretext these people will use to criticize DPP or DPP's rival from Hangul supporters. And the keywords were not helpful also. The keywords were also the other politicians. So we don't know what they are talking about. So if we make we try to combine the analysis of opinion leaders with trendy topics, we find that Mark, let's call him Mark, only came third when talking about making fortune or when talking about air pollution. But marginal commenters like Lee Walker came second when talking about air pollution in Gaussium. And another marginal commenter came first when we go into making fortune. So, opinion leaders on Facebook, we found also this group called Hangul Friends. Yeah, this group was here it is. Was also identified by a journalist as very influential and clearly supported by people from China. And Hangul you mentioned, I don't know who they are, but I thank them for their support. So now we want to continue this analysis of what kind of topics do these people use as a pretext to criticize the rival of Hangul. Thank you for your attention.
The paper will be the next part is with the interview of political guys and give me a tip. You have 16 minutes. Okay.
16?
No, you can use less.
I can use less. We can always talk more.
If you can do less, we have more time for Q&A.
Yeah. Okay. I'll try to talk less. Thank you for inviting me. This workshop's been tremendously informative and helpful for me as I try to figure out what the heck is going on in Taiwan. Like Solomon, last year's election was a big challenge to me because politics, in the way I understand Taiwan politics, they're not supposed to work like that. And so this year makes perfect sense to me. The normal variables are working as expected, but something like Hangul was not supposed to happen in Taiwan. With a strong party system, you're not supposed to get somebody coming out of nowhere in August just emerging as a political superstar from nothing to, oh my gosh, he's going to win. And not only is he going to win, he's going to win in a place that he's not supposed to win. So I spent a lot of the last year trying to figure out what happened. How could that possibly be? And so someone was making some progress. I'm not making much progress at all.
So one of the answers that we're having presented here, one of the potential answers, is that this is a populist movement or a populist wave or something to do with populism. And as I read these papers, it became clear to me that we have no idea what populism is. Every paper has a different discussion of what populism is. So some of the features that this is populism. We have things like different social bases. We have economic crisis or economic transformation. We have strange policies like the Love Ferris wheel policy. We have anti-elitism. We have gosh, what else do we have? We have authoritarianism. Sorry, what? Anti-pluralism. We have something to do with climate. Nobody quite knows how China fits into this story, or Russia and China. Just all kinds of things. At one point, Paul cited somebody who said that traditional Taiwan politics are stuck in this unification independence debate, which is populism, so we can't have normal politics. And I thought, that's populism? So today's keynote lecture by Dr. Muller was actually tremendously helpful, tremendously clarifying. He did what theorists are supposed to do. Cut through all that and said, here is what to look at. This is the essence of populism. The essence of populism is demanding to be able to define who are the people, who are the real people. And everything else flows from that. All these other things are effects, or maybe they're causes. But what's the essence of populism is being able to say, these are the real people, those are not the real people. And that helps you get a grip on what we're talking about here. And so, in thinking about these papers, and in thinking about what's happened in Taiwan over the last year, that gives us a starting point that we can think about. And so all these things about authoritarianism or opposition to global trade or anti-immigration, those come from particular definitions of who the real people are in particular countries. So one of the important points of Dr. Muller's talk, I thought, was that this is going to be different in every place depending on the context in every place. So in a place like Taiwan, which doesn't have the same sort of immigration that you see in the European Union, maybe anti-immigration is not going to be at the center of a Taiwanese populism, right? So that's great. Now, do Koenzi or Guo Taiming or Han Guoyu fit into that kind of rhetoric? Have they actually talked about who are the real people and who are not the real people? And I have to say, not very much. Yeah, Koenzi is certainly anti-elite, but he doesn't systematically say my people have the real public opinion, and people who vote against me are illegitimate in some way. Han Guoyu every now and then will say something very derogatory about Southeastern Asian immigrants. But he does not say that their votes aren't really votes. They don't count, or they shouldn't count. He's never singled out, for example, the KMTs of this legislature, the meantime, as somehow less legitimate than other KMT legislators. A couple of days ago, he suggested that his supporters should stop answering polling questions. This was an obvious opportunity to say, because the polls are illegitimate, they don't reflect the will of the real people. He didn't say that. He didn't say that. He didn't say those people who oppose me, they're not the real people. He said the pollsters maybe are doing something weird and they're manipulating the public opinion, and we'll see what happens on election day, right? But he didn't fundamentally reject the legitimacy of people to vote against him. And so he might do that in the future, but he hasn't done it so far. And so I'm not sure that populism is the right frame to understand what happened in Taiwan over the last year. So that's kind of what I've taken away from this discussion today. And maybe other people will talk about that in some, or think about that in some different ways. Or maybe you could make the argument that I'm overlooking something about Han Kuo-yu's rhetoric or Coenzo's rhetoric. Let me talk more specifically about these two papers. So Solom's paper talks about the social basis of Coenzo and Han Kuo-yu. And it starts from this idea that there are two different big patterns of populism around the world. There's a right-wing populism, a right-wing kind of anti-immigrant populism that we see very heavily in Europe and now in the United States. But there's also this other left-wing populism that is traditionally the dominant form in Latin America, in which the real people are ordinary people and the not real people are the economic elites who are selling out the country to enrich the United States. And so this right-wing authoritarian populism and this left-wing kind of anti-trade or anti-free market populism are two different things. And they suggest that they've appealed traditionally to different sorts of demographic groups, and then demonstrates that Han Kuo-yu has a very different social base than Coenzo, and that this has only emerged over the last 6 months. Between the last 6 months of last year. So between August and November, when Han Kuo-yu suddenly emerged, his new supporters that suddenly emerged had a very different social base, which was interesting. I do want to know, from this point of populism, I would like the theory to be fleshed out. Why would, if there's this one pattern of populism that is the right-wing populism, why would it develop that way? Why would the economically marginalized people be drawn towards this form of anti-immigrant populism, or here in Taiwan, maybe it's not anti-immigrant populism, but whatever whatever Han Kuo-yu is doing. And I'd really like to know a lot more about that. Another thing that Dr. Muller pointed out this morning is that, at least in his definition of populism, which now is theoretically compelling to me, populism is more about elite discourse than about mass social bases. The people who vote for you aren't necessarily popular. What's really critical is the way the elites are talking about it. Are the mass social bases just kind of an effect of the real story, which is elite strategies? Okay, Let me talk briefly about Paul's paper before I come back to some general things about both. So Paul's paper is much more a work in progress, much more early stages of things. And again, a clearer definition of what populism is going to help you define the questions you're asking, and specifically what you want to learn from this massive trove of big data, much more clearly. At present, we're still in the exploratory stages, just looking at what obviously jumps out from this massive set of data that you got. If you decide that what you're really interested in is populism, I'd like to see more tightly focused searches for populist rhetoric. I would like to see much more discussion, or much more, zooming in on keywords about the Southeast Asians, especially when he made comments to that effect in the news, and then look at whether the discussion boards and the Facebook echoed that and picked it up or not. I guess tracking the trending topics to me is not obviously enlightening. My assumption is that the topics that are discussed on all these social media are going to follow the topics in the general campaign. So what I'd really be interested in is which ones didn't track the TV and newspaper campaign. Were there things that they tried to talk about and it didn't resonate online, or were there things that they didn't talk much about in the regular media that did get echoed online? And maybe that would be more informative about something about how what was working online as his online strategies. For both papers, the role of China is some kind of a really muddying factor. We don't quite know how to think about this. If we want to think about it in the framework of populism, personally, I'm not that interested in China's manipulation or trying to stick its finger in. I'm much more interested in how Taiwanese people are talking about China and how Taiwanese population is trying to define China as an outsider, not a legitimate actor within this. Maybe there is some opportunity to talk about populism more theoretically and in the context of a state with disputed sovereignty, and how we define not the national boundaries, but the sovereign state boundaries, and how that fits into this discussion of who are the real people and who are not the real people. I think both papers might try to somehow incorporate China in either a fuller way or just separate that completely into a different topic. Because at the present, it's just a really confusing addition to both arguments.
Thank you. Now we'll move to a Q&A time, and can I invite all presenters to sit down here so you can face the audience. So we are going to take a question from the floor. I hope I can extend the time limit to like 3:50, 10 minutes more for Q&A. And so any people who have questions? 3:50, 10 minutes more. Okay, one question is there. If possible, could you identify yourself before asking your question? Thank you.
Hello, hi. My name is Liano, Vice University. My question is not limited to specific center. My own research deals with discarding and nostalgia. So while I'm learning about politics of nostalgia, it comes to me that there's some association between populism and nostalgia, politics of nostalgia. So what I mean about nostalgia is kind of a collective sentimental longing for familiarity, stability that is based on derived from past, but not necessarily individual or social or historical. So I just wonder, it's kind of an invitation for thought, that what's your own quick thoughts on the overlap between nostalgia and populism based on your research insight? Thank you.
Thank you. Let's press more. The lady over there.
Just
Rolling the microphone.
thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Racy Fan. I'm from UCLA. Actually, from the presentation, I have two responses and also a question for all of you. The first one is from your papers, I didn't really see the factor about how do you analyze the mass media and how they play in the production of so-called populism. Because here in Taiwan, from my observation, I see the whole mass media, especially the TV and the radio and all the internet. It's kind of easy to form communities and network right now. It's quite easy to use the technology to form a community or a discussion group. And then they also make a lot of fake news and the fake information. So I didn't see this. How do you guys see the role of mass media and how they play in the production of populism? And the second one is that, from my observation, actually a lot of the student movement or some anti-government movement is from they didn't trust the government and how they make the policy, especially from the legislative yuan, 立法院, or some 国会议员. And so I don't know how do you guys see this, or how do you analyze the government issue and how the government involved in the social movement and the production of popularism. Thank you so much.
The gentleman over there, and then you.
Hi, hello. My name is Liu Yizhen. Hello, my name is Liu Yizhen. I'm from the National Taiwan University Sociology Department, and I have two questions. The first question is for Professor Paul Cannon. I was wondering when you mentioned how Indian leaders use radios to spread her impact on Indian people, but I'm not very sure about how that mechanism works. For example, how many people actually listen to the radio, and even, for example, how many of them have radios, etc. And the second question is for Professor Lin Zhonghong. I was wondering about the question of the fall of presidential elections of Han Kuo-yu, because in 2018 he was a political superstar, but right now his poll in presidential election is failing. He only earns, I believe, around 25%, and his opponent Taiwan at around 40%, so he is falling behind. And since all these social origins of his supporters haven't changed, I wonder how would you view that he's falling back in this election? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephen Zhou of Nanyang Technological University of Singapore. Just one or two very quick questions for Mr. Lin and also Mr. Joby. Do you really think that populism is a bad thing? Because in its early origins, like in the 19th century, late 19th century in America, populism is a balancing power for elite monopoly of power and also social political discourse. It's a good thing. Now look at Singapore, right? The Singapore government didn't realize until recently that their elite ruling class, the children of the elite class, have grown separated from the commoner. Right? In their childhood, before they go to college, a lot of children of the elite class don't have any friends from the commoner class, and that's a serious problem. Right? Because a lot of these children from better families will become the ruling class, the main force of government, and they have no idea how commoners look like, right? Live like. So populism is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a necessary ingredient. So if we compare populism as an ingredient like sugar, right? Some cuisine use more, or some chefs use more, right? But it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, right? If a chef puts only sugar in food, that's probably a very, very bad choice. But we cannot just give away from sugar.
No, I think
right?
that the real issue is the political responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the democratic system, there is a responsibility within the system. But then, if we talk about the people's movement, there's no one who can be responsible for what they've done.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Can you imagine any former president? Okay,
Can you be sure?
sure. Can you imagine any former president of Taiwan who is not populist? President Li Teng-hui, what people ask for, desire for, always dwell in my heart, right? Tsai Ing-wen asked about Taiwan values. What does it mean? What's the value of Taiwan, Taiwanese society, Taiwanese people? That's also populism.
I think that's a very definitional question that goes forward to the Jamie.
No, I have no question. I think everything is finished.
Okay. Are there any questions before moving back to the presenters? Okay, final one, please.
I'm a student from National Taipei University, and my question is, should we view populism as a belief of people are most important, or a strategy to run election or to win election? Say, for example, in my observation or in my opinion, in his case, the populism is more like a strategy to win election, because if you compare his ideological position or his language, it's very different from now and time before 2014. So there must be some changes between these times, and I think that is the acknowledgement of populism can win election.
Thank you. Now let's move back to our presenters. Please use less than 3 minutes for each. Okay, now Professor Kennedy, you go first.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, there's at least 7 or 8 questions I could answer, so let me sort of pick one or two. I mean, on the definition thing, I think that the real problem here is that there's sort of a circularity problem. So people actually begin with an idea of who they think is populist, for whatever reason. Then they come up with a bunch of characteristics that person or people have, and then they say that's populism. And then they look for people who have those characteristics, and of course they find it's the same people who they began with in the first place. Right? So this is the key problem. So whenever I say that populism is really about it's an organizational science, it's a strategy to win power, I follow Kurt Whalen and Nikos Vizela and sort of older bunch of sociologists. people come back and they say, oh yeah, but then if you use that definition, then this particular party in Europe that I think is populist doesn't fall under your definition, so you're wrong. That's not the right way to do it in my view. I think you need to begin with some sort of first principles, right? So if you begin with the idea of organization, at least you can sort of say, well, populists fall clearly into one or other type of group. Or if you follow Dr. Muller's way of thinking, you end up, well, populists are a subset of authoritarian or anti-democratic type of parties or political actors. So at least there's a way to kind of coherently separate one from the other, and I think that's very important to have. I don't think it's necessarily one approach is right and one is wrong, but some are going to be more useful than others. At least that's the way I see it. And so the organizational thing, which is that sort of strategy and is direct appeal to the people, something like the question on radio, you're talking about sort of 10 to 15 million radios in India, and you need to think about this not in terms of 10 to 15 million individuals, but 10 to 15 million villages, and that's really quite a lot. So we show with, or at least I show in my book, through multivariate analysis with a lot of control variables, that listening to radio and owning a radio predicts voting for the Congress Party. So it is really consequential. It does make a significant difference in your vote. And people find the same thing with voting in 2014. Watching television and owning television is a significant predictor of voting for Modi, even controlling for income and other things that might predict both of those things that might confound that relationship. So we know that media is important in the paper and work that I'm doing with Ronnie. We also find that television viewership predicted voting for Duterte back in 2016. So media does have a sort of key role, and it's part of that strategy. So why do populists rely on the media? Because they don't have sort of access to the same kind of party structures that other type of politicians have. So they need other ways of connecting with the people. And this sort of leads to a sort of, if I have a few more seconds, is that, well, why does this make populism bad? There's no ideology connected to populism. It's just a strategy. Why is it then bad for democracy? And I think it's because populists don't have parties. They're not constrained by informal institutions that actually help democracy work. So we think of parties as these smoke-filled rooms that are necessarily bad things. But one of the good things about those smoke-filled rooms is that you have some people scheming against others, and they keep the leader in check. So if you look at my own adopted country, Australia, how many party spills have you had where leaders just get ejected from power because they lose the support of one faction or another? And that stops this sort of megalomania of any one particular leader who can, like Duterte, get rid of Supreme Court justices, get rid of opponents, get rid of the news media. So it's these informal constraints, ones we tend not to like within parties, they actually serve a positive function, and they stop this accumulation of executive power. So I'll leave it there and pass on to
and just to respond probably to this one issue on the nostalgia. Friends of ours did a study on nostalgia in Indonesia. We was able to link the nostalgia with regard to the authoritarian past and the successes of populist leaders in Indonesia. And we plan to do the same survey in the Philippines. Our problem really is that our demographic would be quite distinct. We do have a lot of historical revisionists right now, and the son of the former President Marcos, Mike Lam, as president, and the historical revisionism is coming from him. So to a certain extent, there's a link between nostalgia and populism, and we also see this in certain statements of Duterte himself, who claims that there were golden years under Marcos also. Second one is on media. I agree with what Paul said. We do still have a role. I think it's more traditional media than social media. We've known, for example, in the Philippines that television is the primary source. It's ubiquitous. Not just possessing a television, but it's really the village watching television. In that sense, their exchanges also impact in terms of the political behavior. The other thing, the other side of mass media that we see in the Philippines is a lot of self-censorship because they've been under attack for quite some time. And that's problematic also, because it's an institution that's supposed to protect. It's an institution supposed to put government basically tiptoe, but it's an institution that has withdrawn from that particular responsibility because of the attacks coming from the president.
In the very beginning, in our paper, we try to measure every candidate of some politicians how populist they are in a 7-point scale. Innovated by Dario Ray and Ray Dario and his colleagues. Even we get that Hungary has 4 points and Korea has 3 points and Taiwan maybe have 1 or 2 points. So it can still, make difference between, who is more populist than the others, but it's not really, they can beat the 7 points at all, because it's very, very difficult to, So I agree that people are somehow a little bit populist. I mean the politicians in Taiwan. But there are still some difference if you really try to measure that. And then the problem is that how they rise and fall because certain of the changing social basis of the voters. So I think that recently in a sense that populist is maybe a good challenge to Taiwan's democracy at this time, because it is noticed the DPP government, in fact, there are a lot of losers in globalization that they don't really save in their first term, over China's first term. So, in fact, they try to indeed try a lot of policies, such as yes, the night market, bonus, something like that. Something like that to input money into the target that being the target of Hungary effect. So in fact they try to counterbalance, try to use a lot of redistributive policies, try to do something to those losers in globalization in Taiwan. So I think that we can see it works in this election.
Okay, we'll have the final result.
First of all, thank you very much to Nathan for its stimulating suggestions. And sorry, I cannot answer to all the questions, but just speaking about the mass media, the question about mass media, well, of course, the idea with using big data is obviously to try to find a way to analyze mass media, the role of the impact of mass media in so-called populism. But of course we cannot look at radio, television. So from those are only written text. Even there is only a few oral. You correct me if I'm wrong, Joey, but I think there is a very few written transcription of oral speeches, for example. So I think big data are an interesting tool, an interesting angle to look at the impact of mass media into a phenomenon like populism. But we lack a lot of there is a lot of dead angles. But I would like to follow on Paul Kenny's remark about the circularity of our description on populism. I think it's very important. And I learned a lot from their Paul's research as well, Professor Junior. And I think for me, I would like to practice what I would call a kind of epistemic agnosticism, meaning that I don't care who defines who is populist. What I look at as a sociologist of criticism is the fact is, Kang Guoyu, Guotaiming, Zhou, these three guys have been described by social researchers, political analysts, journalists, all kinds of people. They have been described as populists. So I would take this as a starting point. It's not mine. I don't care. But I don't like Kang Guoyu's Burger style because I am a bourgeois. Okay, it's a matter of faith. I'm not a fan of Zhou, but that's personal taste. But I look at the fact that they are described as populists. Same for Duterte, same for Moody. So Indira Gandhi's case is more original. I didn't know she was defined as a populist, or you made it, right? is yours. So, yeah, that's it. No, it's just, okay, you conclude.
Oh, thank you. We'll end 10 minutes later than the speaker, and staff just asked me to remind everyone that we have snacks and drink outside, but that reserved for invited and registered people. So, it's again, anti-populist. Give a big hand for the 4 presenters.
Thank you, and we start again at 4 o'clock. Yeah, 4 o'clock is next.
4, right? We have to do at 4, right?
4 o'clock, 4 o'clock.
No,